When he saw his beloved son's throat being slit, the father instantly imagined 100 ways to kill the murderer. But what he never expected was that the three masterminds behind it had deliberately left one of their accomplices at the crime scene. Faced with this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, John charged at the killer in a frenzy, determined to make him pay the ultimate price. In the fierce struggle, John ripped the killer's mask off, and with just one glance, he burned that face into his memory. But after the killer escaped, John realized his son was no longer breathing. Even with the doctor's best efforts, they couldn't bring him back from the brink of death. What was even more heartbreaking was that his son hadn't died from blood loss, but had suffocated to death as blood flooded back into his lungs. That meant the pain his son endured before dying far exceeded anyone's imagination. It also strengthened John's resolve. He would make every one of the killers pay with blood for blood. But on the day of the trial, John gave an answer that shocked everyone. When the judge asked him to confirm whether the man before him was the killer, John replied that it was too dark to see clearly, because deep down, John knew that under their local laws, the murderer would only be sentenced to 3 years and be treated like royalty in prison. So John chose to lie under oath, gambling the rest of his life on a false testimony just so he could personally butcher the scum who killed his son. That night, he waited outside the killer's home. The moment that man stepped outside, John was ready to fight a life or death battle. Jesus! But to his disbelief, the man had no remorse whatsoever. Instead, he viciously mocked John's dead son. That instant, John snapped. Why was it that his precious son was buried underground while the killer was shielded and protected? If the law wouldn't deliver justice, then John would do it himself. During the intense brawl, John plunged a knife into the man's abdomen, but even that wasn't enough to quench his rage. He pulled the blade out and stabbed again and again, turning the murderer's body into a blood-soaked mess. Even then, John didn't stop, because his brutally murdered son would never return. To avoid being caught, John pulled the fingerprint-covered knife from the body, drove to a remote bridge on the outskirts of town, wiped the handle clean with a towel, and tossed the knife into a foul-smelling ditch. But once he got home and stepped into the shower, he could no longer hold back his emotions and broke down in tears. He didn't know whether what he did was right or wrong, but in the moment he killed his son's murderer, it felt like a part of him had finally been freed.